Imagine it's Thanksgiving weekend, like back in 1989.
Hmm.
And this young woman, she heads out for a jog, like she always does.
Yeah.
Her family dog, they're running alongside her. Picture a small town, peaceful, the kind of place where nobody locks their doors, you know what I mean? Neighbors, they all know each other. But this time, something's different. The runner, she doesn't come home. This is the story of Mandy Stavic and how people fought for justice for decades.
It's incredible the detail in this podcast episode you shared. We're going to dive deep today. Not just what happened, but like how and why. The details, they're chilling. How she disappeared, the people who never gave up looking for her killer, and the science. Unbelievable breakthroughs that finally brought him down.
This story, it might hit home for a lot of you listening. If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, we were all young once, right? Maybe in towns a lot like Mandy's. It's like a reminder, even in those picture-perfect places, bad things can happen when you least expect it.
Let's talk about Mandy. We learned from the podcast she's 18, full of life, home from college for the holiday, a star athlete, good student. You get the sense she was going to do amazing things. It's important to see that, to understand what was taken.
She sounds so familiar, someone we all knew growing up, full of energy, dreams. The podcast really makes that clear. She was special, which makes the whole thing even more tragic. It was Friday. She went for her usual run with Kira, the family dog, a golden retriever, just a normal day, part of their routine.
And then, well, the unthinkable. Mandy doesn't come back. Her mom starts to worry, of course. Starts calling around, nobody's seen her. So they retrace her running route, desperate for anything. And then Kira comes home, but she's alone. And something's off.
She was almost like traumatized, Kira. Not herself at all. Skittish, muddy, covered in this like river silt, tail between her legs. Not the happy dog she usually was.
Yeah.
It was obvious something happened, something that scared her and separated her from Mandy.
So the family, they call the police. And good thing they did. The police take it seriously, right away. A full-scale search. Volunteers, search and rescue, even this famous tracker, Alan Pratt.
What did they find?
So Pratt, he finds this disturbed area right by the road, along her usual route. Signs of a struggle, more of that river silt. This isn't just a missing person anymore. It starts to look like an abduction. And that, well, it terrifies everyone.
The fear, it must have been paralyzing. This wasn't even the first young woman to disappear around there. Though those other cases, it seems like they weren't connected to Mandy's. Still, someone out there preying on young women. Terrifying.
You're right. People started locking their doors, I bet, for the first time. Buying guns, on edge. The sheriff's office, they put out warnings, be careful, be vigilant. That sense of security, gone, just like that, especially when it happens so close to home.
The podcast, it talks about this massive search effort. Hundreds of people looking, on foot, horses, even planes and helicopters. But the weekend passes, nothing. Then the focus shifts to the Nooksack River nearby. Why the river?
Well, think about it. Kira comes back covered in that river silt, right? And the spot where they think something happened, also near the river, like puzzle pieces starting to come together.
And those pieces, they led to something awful, didn't they? Just a few days later, they find her body on a sandbar in the river, naked. It wasn't clear how she died at first, but there were scratches like she'd been running through the woods or something.
The autopsy, it revealed the truth, and it was horrible. She drowned, but that wasn't all. Blunt force trauma to the head, and signs of sexual assault. She was alive. For a while, after she was taken, she fought to get away.
They found semen, but this is 1989. DNA, it wasn't like it is now. They had the sample, but no immediate answers. It's just heartbreaking. Even with that evidence, they were so far from finding her killer.
I know. So homicide investigation, the community, they rally around the family. But that fear, it was still there. Everyone wondering who could do this, and are they still out there?
And then there's this lead. The pudgy-faced man. Some witnesses, they said they saw a guy matching this description in a station wagon, right around the time Mandy vanished. The police, they put out a sketch, but it went nowhere. Months turn into years, and the case goes cold.
Happens a lot with these kinds of cases. The initial rush, the tips, it all fades away. The trail goes cold, and the family is left with so much pain and no answers.
But then, 1992, a twist. They identify someone. Lived on the same road as Mandy, Paul Malik. Tell me about him.
This is where things get a little messy. Malik, he said they forced him to give hair and saliva samples. He sued the county. Said they treated him badly, ruined his reputation. It was a big controversy. But in the end, it didn't help them solve the case. Years go by, and the case, it just sits there. Mandy's family, her friends, they're left with this pain, so many unanswered questions. But something's happening behind the scenes. A revolution, you could say, in forensic science.
This is where it changes, right?
Mhm.
DNA technology, it starts to give hope to these cold cases. I remember hearing about it back then. It was like something out of a movie.
Exactly. And that's what brings Mandy's case back to life. 2009. Detective Kevin Bohé, he was just a rookie cop when she disappeared. He reopens the whole investigation, driven by this incredible new DNA science.
So he basically starts over, goes back through everything, all the evidence, the interviews.
Yeah, pretty much. He talks to everyone again, collects new DNA samples, anything that could be tested with these new techniques. And they start to think maybe her abductor, it was someone she knew, someone who could have easily, gotten her into a car and then assaulted her, got rid of the body to cover it up.
The scratches on her body, her fight, it all points to that, doesn't it? Horrible.
It does. Bohé, he was determined to get justice for Mandy, for her family, and that determination, it leads him to Timothy Bass.
Bass. Why him? What made him stand out?
A few things. First, his younger brother, Tom. He was one of the last people to see her alive. They had plans to hang out the night she disappeared. And then, when Bohé interviews Tim, he's weird about it, says he barely remembers Mandy, refuses to give a DNA sample.
Okay, hearing that, red flags, right?
Yeah.
Refusing a DNA test when you're a suspect. Super suspicious.
Absolutely. But Bohé's stuck. No physical evidence, nothing connecting Bass directly to the crime. Getting a warrant for his DNA, almost impossible.
So he knows, but he can't prove it. Must have been so frustrating. What happened next?
Here's where things get, well, kind of unbelievable. It's 2013, and these two moms, Heather Backstrom and Marilee Anderson, they're at a water park with their kids, just chatting, and somehow they start talking about Mandy's case. It was still unsolved,
And they both had this feeling about the same guy, Tim Bass.
Yeah. Turns out both of them had these creepy encounters with him years earlier. Always wondered if he was involved with Mandy's death.
It's like all these separate things coming together, the moms talking at the water park, the suspicion. And later on, we'll see how another random event breaks the case wide open. But first, tell me about those encounters. What happened?
So, Marilee, she said Bass showed up at her house once when she
Yeah.
was alone with her baby, said he needed to use the phone, but then he made these unwanted advances, really unsettling. And Heather, she told a story about when she was 15. Bass was all over her, flirty, touching her. Inappropriate.
It's scary to think they carried that with them for years. Makes you wonder how many other people had similar experiences with him but never said anything.
You're right. It's so important to speak up, even when it's hard. You never know how your story might connect to something bigger. And in this case, it was their bravery that helped solve it.
They went to the police, right? What did Bohé do?
He was so thankful. Their stories backed up what he already suspected about Bass, but still no physical evidence, couldn't arrest him. So close, but not quite there.
Knowing he was out there, maybe he's still a danger. Agonizing.
Oh, it was. Bohé, he tried everything. Even reached out to Kim Wagner. She managed the bakery where Bass worked, tried to get her to let him swab the delivery trucks for DNA. A long shot, but he had to try.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Did they cooperate?
No. Corporate said no. Another dead end. But then Kim Wagner, she does something amazing.
Okay, this is it, the turning point. What did you do?
She saw Bass throw away a cup and a can in the break room at work. And she took them.
Wow. Collected the evidence herself. Incredible. I mean, brave, definitely. But maybe legally kind of risky.
You're right. Her decision to go to Detective Bohé, it was a turning point, raising questions about the rules, the law, But for her, it was about doing the right thing, getting justice for Mandy and her family.
Tough situation. But what happened when they tested those things?
Perfect match. The DNA on the cup and can, it matched the semen from Mandy's body, the odds. 1 in 11 quadrillion. To put that in perspective, it's like finding one specific grain of sand on every beach in the world. Irrefutable.
Case closed. Finally.
Yeah.
They got him.
They did. December 2017. Tim Bass arrested for Mandy Stavic's murder. The whole community was in shock, especially her family. They had waited so long for this.
But it's not over yet, is it? The trial, all the legal stuff. Did Bass confess? Or did he say he was innocent?
Oh, he said he was innocent. Even came up with some crazy stories, tried to make Mandy look bad.
What do you mean? Like what?
He asked his own mother to lie for him, give him a fake alibi, and then he tried to get his brother to spread rumors about Mandy. Said she slept around, hoping that would make the jury doubt her. Despicable. Thankfully, it didn't work.
Trying to trash her reputation after you.
Uh-huh.
Awful. But the DNA, it was so strong. What else could his lawyers do?
They tried. They said, yeah, Bass had sex with Mandy, but it was consensual. Said he had no idea how she died.
That's hard to believe, given everything else.
It was. They tried to find holes in the prosecution's case. Said that timeline didn't make sense. Maybe Mandy was with someone else after her run and that person killed her. But the DNA, it was their biggest problem.
So, May 2019. Decades later, the trial starts. Must have been so emotional for everyone.
Oh, yeah. Especially for Mandy's family, her friends, hearing all the details again. But it was also a chance to finally see justice done.
How did it go? What was the prosecution's strategy?
They were ready. They had been waiting for this. They went through everything step by step, laid out the whole thing, the abduction, the attack, her trying to escape, the blow to the head that killed her, and how he put her body in the river.
And what about Kim Wagner? Getting the DNA. Did the defense try to use that against them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They said she was working for the police, that the DNA shouldn't count because they didn't have a warrant, tried to make it look like she was on the police's side, even though there was no proof.
Did they win? Did they throw out the DNA?
No. The judge, he said she acted on her own. Not because the police told her to. That was huge. It meant the DNA evidence stayed, and that led to the guilty verdict.
Amazing.
Yeah.
One person doing the right thing. It can change everything. Imagine being her. Seeing Bass toss that cup. She could have ignored it, but she didn't. And that's why they got him. It shows how any of us, we can make a difference, even in small ways.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Kim Wagner, she's a hero. And what she did, it had consequences beyond this case. It showed how regular people can help with investigations, even when it's risky.
So the trial goes on. What was it like in the courtroom?
You could feel it, the tension, everyone waiting. The prosecution had done a good job, but it all came down to the jury.
What did they decide?
They took a little over a day, and then they came back guilty. First-degree murder, and all the other charges, too. Rape, attempted rape, kidnapping, attempted kidnapping. Everyone was crying. Relief, sadness, it was a lot.
I can only imagine that moment for Mandy's family, her friends, all those years waiting, not knowing. Finally, some justice, knowing he'd pay for what he did.
Yeah. Bass, he got 26 years. Brought some closure, I think, to a case that had hung over the whole community for so long. Of course, no amount of time can, bring Mandy back. But at least he was finally being held accountable.
You'd think, with a case that strong, that'd be it. But we see it all the time, right? These high-profile cases, there's always more to this story.
Yeah.
Bass, he appealed. Tried to get the conviction overturned.
He did. Challenged the DNA again. Same arguments about Kim Wagner, how they got the samples. Even said the felony murder law they used, it was unconstitutional because it was changed after the crime.
Sounds desperate. Like they were trying anything.
Yeah, it did seem that way. But it shows how even when someone's clearly guilty, the legal system, it can be complicated, unpredictable.
So what happened? Did the appeals work?
Nope. The appeals court, they upheld the conviction. Tim Bass, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. No more appeals, no more legal games, just the reality of what he did.
Must have been a relief for Mandy's loved ones. Knowing it was finally over, no more fighting, no more court dates.
Definitely. They could finally, focus on healing, remembering Mandy for who she was, not just this case, this tragedy.
Mandy's story, it brings up so many questions, not just about the crime, but about technology, how it's used in law enforcement, about communities coming together, and how trauma, it can last for so long.
It's one of those stories that sticks with you. I think it's because it speaks to everyone, in a way. Innocence lost, how fragile life is, how strong people can be.
It's tough, to think someone like her, so full of life, could be taken like that. It makes you question things. And it makes you realize how precious life is every moment.
Absolutely. And while we can't bring Mandy back, we can learn from this. Be more aware, speak up if something feels wrong, be there for each other when things get tough.
This case, it shows how something small, like Kim Wagner picking up that cup, it can snowball, lead to something huge. We all have the power to do that, to make a difference, even if we don't realize it.
That's what we hope people take away from this. Not just the sadness, but the hope, the feeling that you can do something. Understanding these kinds of stories, that's how we make things better. Safer, more just.
This deep dive, it's been heavy. But in the end, I think it's a story about good winning, about law enforcement not giving up, a community sticking together, and getting justice for Mandy Stavic.
Thank you for listening. We hope this deep dive made you think, maybe even gave you some hope.
And if you want to hear more stories like this, more deep dives into these complex real-life cases, Make sure you subscribe to The Deep Dive. We'll keep bringing you conversations that go deeper, that make you think. Until next time, keep asking questions.